helps you know why you're doing what you're doing. So what I'm going to share is extremely personal for me, and some of the topics are actually quite emotional. And you guys, because you're the extended family of Code.org, I thank you for supporting me and sharing this and hearing my full story, which I've honestly never shared before in front of so large an audience. This will be very different than my usual Code.org speech. My mom was a computer scientist in Iran. She had to leave her job because she was a woman. My dad was a physicist. He started a university which is now the MIT of the Middle East. So computer science and education are in my blood, as they say, but that's only part of my why. I grew up in Iran. It is a beautiful country with jungles and beaches, mountains and ski resorts, and shopping malls. And Tehran, the capital, is really quite different than the stereotypes you see in Western media. The Iranian Revolution happened when I was 6 years old. Our entire family wealth was wiped out. One morning I was part of a wealthy family of entrepreneurs. The next day it had all been seized by the government. I have a very large extended family, and almost all of them, grandparents, cousins, and aunts and uncles, all fled the country. My father kept our family behind because he believed in education and he wanted to keep his university stable at a time of upheaval. I spent most of my early childhood in almost continuous fear. At first it was fear of the government. I had heard of family friends who had been whisked away or jailed or killed for no reason, and I worried it could happen to my parents. I had to pretend my family was Muslim. I prayed in school every day because it was mandatory. I told nobody that we had a piano at home or that we played cards for fun. I learned to assimilate in a totalitarian Islamic culture, and I learned it was safest not to talk to anybody about anything and to pretend like I wasn't different than anybody else. It was an environment where the safest thing to do was not to be seen or noticed, not to be different. Pop music was illegal. Cars were stopped by armored guards on the street to make sure nobody was privately listening to the wrong type of music. And we would chant "Death to America" every single day at the start of school. And while I was chanting with everybody else, I secretly wished I could live in America with all the rest of my family that I loved. Then Iraq invaded and began a brutal war. Our street was next to the country's only TV station, which was a major bombing target. Every night we went to the basement, we lit candles, and held our ears for hours until the bombing stopped. In the mornings, my dad would climb up the roof to check out the damage next door. Basic things like bread or milk suddenly became precious goods, and because money was short, we'd stand in line for hours to get a bottle of milk. The military and machine guns were everywhere, and it was common to see tanks in the middle of the street. Finally, the war reached a point where my parents worried it wasn't safe. If we turned 13, my brother and I couldn't leave the country, and we might get drafted. The draft age was very young in Iran. 13-year-olds were being forced to clear minefields. So when we turned 11, my parents decided to leave Iran to come to the United States. We couldn't get United States visas immediately, so we went to Italy first. Whatever money or property my family had, we had to leave it all behind. So for the second time, my family lost everything. The only thing we could take out of Iran were my mom's wedding jewelry, which she had sewn into my clothing. And so without even knowing it, my brother and I were helping her smuggle a little bit out of Iran to help our family start a new life. I can't imagine what would happen if you'd been caught. Getting into the US wasn't easy. We applied 3 times just to visit our family as tourists, and we were rejected each time because we were Iranian. When we finally got accepted, we had short-term visas. My parents tried converting my brother and myself to student visas, but we were rejected again and had to leave the United States immediately. We went to Canada and found a generous lawyer who helped us apply again. My parents didn't tell me that if this didn't work, that we'd been deported and we'd have to return back to Iran. Fortunately, we were finally admitted back to the United States, but neither my mom or dad could stay, so they both had to return, and my dad spent an entire year living in Iran through the continuing war before he could come back. When we finally settled down in the United States, we were poor. My parents worked 3 different jobs, and my father commuted 200 miles from New York to Boston, and they invested everything into my education. They didn't spend that on anything else. We didn't have our own home, and even we didn't have our own bed. We shared one bedroom at my grandmother's house. So all 4 of us, my mom, my dad, my brother, two twin beds stuck together. Everybody struggles with the stresses of fitting in and all the life changes of becoming a 7th grader. For me, the stress of being poor and not having my own address or even my own bed was in sharp contrast to my schoolmates' lives. Because my parents valued education above anything else, they put us in the fanciest private school, which supported us generously with financial aid. So we went to school with the wealthiest families in New York, and we were by far the poorest kids in the school. We couldn't afford new clothing, so my brother and I only wore loose-fitting hand-me-downs. When we finally got a car, it was because my brother and I had pooled our savings from all this work we'd done over the summers and shared a car for $500. But all of this was actually incredibly fabulous because we no longer lived in fear of dying. What wasn't fabulous was being teased at school, being teased for being Iranian with jokes about bombing Iran. My first nickname was Sheikh. My next nickname was Jihad, basically calling me an Islamic terrorist. As I strove to fit in, I learned to keep my head down and to laugh along at jokes made at my expense. I spoke perfect English, but I had an accent, and I was a nerd who loved computers. I never went on a date, not even the prom. I had only 2 or 3 close friends through all of school. Even when I got into an elite university, I didn't have an elite background, so I was rejected by all the social clubs on campus. But after that, I made it. I made it because of my parents' investment in my education. I got into the best university. I attended on financial aid, and I worked every school year and summer to pay tuition. And I majored in computer science. Since my first job in technology, I've had doors open for me, thanks to a network of fellow students and colleagues. And being a white-ish male in tech with a background in computer science has allowed me to live the American dream and reach a level of success I never dreamed of. But although my skin is whitish, my life hasn't felt privileged all the time. Iranian Americans and Middle Easterners in general have sought for decades to be classified by the United States as people of color. I live in an awkward middle ground. My skin is whitish, but my name doesn't sound like it, and I'm definitely not always treated like it. When some crazy white guy shoots up Indian Americans in Kansas and his defense is that he thought they were Iranian, or when somebody else burns a mosque or deliberately attacks Muslims like they did in March or in April or in May, including in Silicon Valley, it reminds me that the discrimination I face in this country is alive and well today, and it is life-threatening. Unlike some forms of discrimination which are illegal, discrimination against Iranians is not only bipartisan, it's sanctioned by our government and enshrined in our laws. Under the Reagan administration, I was rejected entry 3 times and deported once because I was Iranian. President Obama signed a law banning anybody of Iranian descent from participating in the visa waiver program, even if they were born and lived their entire life in Europe as European citizens. And the Trump administration took this a step further and banned all people of Iranian descent from entering the United States. These aren't just theoretical issues, they affect me personally. A few months ago, my mother-in-law had to visit her family back in Iran, who aren't allowed to visit here. And then with all the recent tensions with that government, we had to worry about whether she'd ever be able to come back and whether my children would see their grandmother again. I'm going to stop showing slides for a moment. I'm not comfortable sharing any of this, and I never have before, and I'm not asking for pity. This isn't a sob story. My life is an absolute dream. I wake up every day feeling like I'm the luckiest person in the world and doing the most incredible job in the world. I've had helping hands throughout my career, and doors have opened for me in amazing ways that have made my success possible. And being a whitish male in tech has given me opportunities that I wouldn't have had and protected me from all sorts of terrible obstacles that others face in the tech industry. But my story isn't just a story about opportunity, it's also a story about discrimination. I've faced discrimination for my name, for my nationality, for my culture, for my accent, for my perceived religious beliefs, and for being poor and not having a home. I lived my entire life, whether in Iran or in the United States, knowing that as a matter of personal safety, I need to pretend like I'm the same as everybody else. Of course, not all discrimination is the same. We all have room to grow to better understand the specific challenges faced by groups different than ourselves. But discrimination of any sort builds empathy and prepares oneself for allyship. And overcoming adversity or injustice builds empathy for others who face adversity or injustice. And those others need allies. I'm proud to have dedicated my life to supporting women and people of color in computer science. I'm also extremely proud that my own work personally reflects on Iranian Americans and our struggle to overturn the anti-immigrant policies enacted by both Republican and Democratic administrations. This is why I begin every interview, speech, or television appearance with my own immigrant story, because at a time of historic xenophobia around the world, immigrants in general and Iranians in particular need public examples to change the narrative. After a lifetime of trying to pretend I'm not different, my work at Code.org was the first time in my life I've begun openly and proudly introducing myself as an Iranian immigrant because of the impact it has for immigrant communities. Excuse me. Now we're back to the regular part of the presentation. I share all this because this is my why. When I read about Spencer Applegate in rural Kentucky, who wrote a Tetris app in Code.org's app lab, thanks to his teacher who began teaching computer science for the first time, but he couldn't afford a phone. Or when I read about Araceli Casillas learning CS principles as a child of immigrants in South Seattle, in a family whose parents had never gone to college, when I hear these children's story, I see my own story. Each of us here has their own why. Each of us has a story that motivates us. My immigrant story isn't on Code.org's homepage because Code.org's work isn't about me, or my birthplace, upbringing, skin color, or my personal beliefs. It's defined by our shared goals, our shared vision, and by what we do for students in classrooms. And each of you who are here are following a similar path. Each of you has made some sort of sacrifice to be here. Each of you has a personal story that draws you to a shared vision. I started Code.org because I believe that opportunity shouldn't depend on the color of your skin, your gender, your nationality, your name, your zip code, your religion, or anything. This is an idea that everybody in the world can get behind. This is what unites everybody working on this mission. This is our shared why. In the last 6 years, the vision that computer science is for every student in every school has united people across every boundary you could imagine, whether gender, race, ethnicity, political parties, and even across countries. Just as we are united in our cause, we're also different in our personal backgrounds, and this is what gives our movement strength. Our strength comes from celebrating that each of us has a different personal story, we have different political beliefs, and yet we're all aiming for the same North Star. Now, the work that we're doing at Code.org and the work that all of the organizations here are doing is not only about getting every student in every school to learn computer science, but to make that happen, we need to give special priority to the underserved and to the underrepresented groups, which are many different types of groups, whether it's young women, whether it's students of color, whether it's students from different socioeconomic backgrounds, students in rural communities, around the world, students who don't have access to the internet or don't have access to computers. These are all things that hold students back behind from opportunity, and these are all barriers we need to spend extra money, extra time, extra resources, extra attention to overcome. I want to set some goals for the groups working on this, especially the United States goals, because most of the people in the room are from the United States. The goals we set for Code.org, these are goals I wrote down a few years ago. By 2025, I believe we can reach the goal of having every single US school teach computer science. This isn't a hockey stick goal, this is simply continuing the path that we've been having for the last 6 years. And by 2030, I believe we can get every single student learning computer science. Again, this isn't an unreachable goal. My team has asked me at times whether we are serious when we talk about every student in every school, or whether that's just sort of a hokey vision. But we are serious about it. We think it is possible. And in fact, the rate of change we've seen in the last 6 years of global education makes this achievable. Now, I want to celebrate the amazing progress this movement has had in the past 6 years. If you look inside the momentum inside the United States, what's happened in the last 6 years is incredible. We just today announced from yesterday released our State of Computer Science report showing that 45% of all US schools teach computer science. And 40% of students in this country now have accounts on Code.org, and the majority of these students, over 70%, are young women and students of color. Your work is what made this possible. And another story that an accomplishment we just celebrated today, we posted to social media, the group of regional partners and facilitators and the extended network of Codeverse Partner, as of today, has prepared 100,000 new computer science teachers. Your work made this possible. When I started this work, there was a vision about computer science 10K, CS 10K, the idea of preparing 10,000 new computer science teachers. That was only 5 years ago, and it's incredible that in 5 years we've had 100,000 teachers attend workshops, tens of thousands of them being high school teachers teaching year-long AP computer science classes. This is something I've never done before, but those of you who have phones with the Twitter app installed, I want to ask you to pull out your phones and open the camera and see if you can scan that QR code. That will take you to the tweet cell.